Welcome to Your Need to Know. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and joining me today is Delegate Kathleen Murphy. She represents the House District here in Virginia, District 34. Thank you so much for being here, Delegate Murphy.
Well, thanks for having me.
So we are in a re-election year, which has escaped some people who are already focused on 2020.
I've noticed that.
Have you noticed that? I have too. And it's kind of like, I try to explain on these shows about the 4-year cycle that dear old Harry Byrd slotted us into, which means that in the 4th year of the cycle, you have the least amount of voters voting for the largest number of candidates.
Largest number of candidates, the House and the Senate, both. Believe me, this has been an interesting year for an election. Not my first off-year election, but it's interesting because, number one, people are far more concerned about who's running for president than they are about who's running for the House of Delegates or the state Senate. But it's also meant that the people running for the presidency are taking up all the funds that we need from our donors to run effective campaigns.
And they're also taking up all the airwaves. And this is the problem with an off-year election. There's no governor, there's no congressional candidates, there's no Senate candidates. Normally, even a little bit of national media would affect the top of the ticket.
Well, we do have state senators running this year. We have Barbara Favola in our district. But that hasn't really helped.
No,
it's
just
and we do have supervisors. Don't forget the supervisors.
And the school board.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so in your district alone, you have somebody running for school board in the Drainesville district.
Yep.
John Faust is running for re-election to the Board of Supervisors in the Drainesville district.
Yep.
We've got Stacey Kincaid, who's running for re-election for sheriff. District attorney, we've got Steve Descano, who's running for Commonwealth's attorney. I mean, these are things that most people don't sit around thinking about, these offices on a daily.
My district covers both Fairfax and
Loudoun.
So we have the same going on
in the Loudoun County too.
Sure.
You know.
So we have a lot of candidates, and it's really hard. You knock on doors and people say, "Oh my God, not another one," and you're saying, "Really? I'm your delegate. I care about you." It's hard. It's harder. But you know, it's always good when you're out talking to the people who you represent. It's always important to make sure they know what you're up to and what you're doing for them. And it's always even more important to hear from them about what the issues are that are first and foremost going to get them out to the polls.
And what are you hearing on the doors when you knock on a door? You know, and I'm Kathleen Murphy and I'm your delegate. You know, what are you hearing that they care about?
In the 34th district, there are 2 things they care about: Route 7 and Georgetown Pike.
Roads.
Yes,
transportation.
Roads. The construction that's going on and the widening of Route 7 has caused a lot of concerns for a lot of different neighborhoods. I try and make every single one of those meetings. The unfortunate part of Waze sending people off
through secondary roads.
Well, there's secondary roads right through my
neighborhoods.
Yeah. To get to the bridge, you know, without having to sit in traffic from Tyson's to Georgetown Pike.
Well, I will tell you, I am guilty of that. I think
well, shame on you.
I know, but like everybody else, I'm like, you turn on Waze, and it's rush hour, and you're trying to get through that congested area, and yes, indeedy, they do send you through neighborhoods.
The trouble is, in our neighborhoods that they're sending them through is school buses are trying to get kids home. There aren't always sidewalks in these areas, and people are speeding.
Yeah.
I mean, it's gonna be a tragedy that impacts them, but we are talking about this. We're working on this. We're talking to VDOT. We're talking to the people who control Waze, just trying to get people to be sensible about this. And VDOT, you know, may come up with some signage that says do not enter between certain hours. So John Faust and I worked on a little bill that allows the residents of the neighborhood to have stickers on their cars so that if VDOT puts a sign up that says no through traffic or no right turn, they'll still be able to turn into their own neighborhoods. And that was a hard thing to get done because nobody could really understand why it was necessary.
You know, you bring up something else very interesting, many interesting things in that. First of all, I want to explore more how you do work with local boards of supervisors, both in Loudoun and in Fairfax County, because there are things that are regional. They're not just handled in Richmond, but
right.
that brings up the second interesting thing about being a Dillon Rule state, which again, a lot of people cannot grasp what that means.
It means that I had to get permission from the state so that our local delegates could issue a sticker.
Right, and that seems...
It seems kind of silly, doesn't it?
Seem kind of, but that's what we have. That's what Virginia is saddled with on so many levels. So even getting a sticker from your Board of Supervisors requires working with your state delegate to get approval from the state legislator about a local sticker in a local neighborhood. I really want people to understand this.
Well, it's a good thing that we're such good friends. John Faust and I are very good friends, and we work very well together.
So when we talk about transportation, we talk about roads, and we talk about it all the time around here because congestion is a problem. Once HQ2 comes in and we've got a lot more people in a concentrated area who want to live close to where they work, for years, Bob Buchanan of the 2030 group has been saying the best thing that could happen to this region is a second bridge crossing over the Potomac in the west.
I think eventually that'll happen, but right now we have to come up with the money to rehab the American Legion Bridge.
True.
I mean, how can you spend money on a second bridge that's way out in Loudoun and won't solve the problem in McLean and Great Falls and Tyson's, which is where the
that
cars
bottleneck is.
Yeah.
You know, but I look at the Silver Line opening in Dulles 55 years after the airport opened.
Yeah.
Now, Dulles is one of the only
It took
international
them a while to figure it out.
But it's one of the only national airports in the world that does not have public transportation in the world. And it took decades, literally I am telling you decades, to move the parties involved to approve a metro line to that airport. And that's what worries me about that second bridge.
I think part of that is to slow down development. People keep thinking if you put in metros, it'll just grow our population.
But it is anyway, and those cars are overloading the roads. So,
well, I mean, just keep in mind they did just build a brand new city at Tyson's.
yes, they did.
And I'm really not sure where they think all the cars are going to go.
Well, I guess they're hoping that
They're going to go through McLean, which
they
is
will.
going to make
But I
me
think
unhappy.
they're hoping too that the younger generation of millennials who don't seem to be particularly attached to the idea of owning a car
That's true.
will take public transportation. But you have to have good, reliable, affordable public transportation.
I think we're moving in that direction.
I do too, and I have great hope that millennials and Gen Z actually will be like, who wants to own a car? It's expensive. It's
Very
parked
expensive.
most of the time,
Yeah.
and you can't get anywhere in your car anyway.
Well, and it costs you time and money to get into the city, and then it costs you $20 or $30 a day
park.
to park.
I know.
I mean, that.
We need to turn the corner on it. We really do. But so let's talk a little bit about the fact that because we're a Dillon Rule state, you do work with the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors and with the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors.
Well, I work more with the Fairfax County supervisors. Our Loudoun County supervisors, there's some good ones. Phyllis Randall
She's
is a
the best, isn't
superstar.
she? I just
She's
love
a
Phyllis so
superstar.
much. I do. But there has to be local and state cooperation because of this structure.
And I'm a very cooperative person.
I know that you are.
I grew up in a family with 7 kids. You had to be cooperative.
Grew up in a family with 7 kids and you've got 6.
Well, that's true.
That's true.
I didn't birth them all, only 4, and then I got 2 more.
You inherited 2,
yes. I did.
But that's a lot. So you actually keep a lot of things in the air.
Well, we have 9 grandchildren now too.
I'm
lucky.
I know you are. I'm looking forward to that day too, coming quickly. So let me ask you about your background. I mean, you have actually been in and around politics your entire adult life.
Well, even when I was a kid.
Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing what you've done.
When I was a little kid, John F. Kennedy ran for president, and I had a grandmother who was just, she was a precinct person in Louisville, Kentucky.
Oh.
And she would tell me, you see that man? He is beautiful, and he's wonderful, and he's a Democrat, and you should be a Democrat.
Go, Grandma.
And then she would say, you know, you're born a Democrat, you live a Democrat, and you die a Democrat, and don't think any other way. I think it would have been impossible for me if I'd have ever really thought about being a Republican. But as I've gotten older, I've understood why democratic principles are the principles that are so important.
And this is what I think, to drive home to our own party, that you have to vote your values. We
Yes.
get kind of hung up in the who And are we inspired? And, are they the most likable person? Do we agree with them on every issue? The thing is, we need to agree with their core values, because
you're
that's
never,
what we're electing.
ever going to agree with anybody
on
every
everything.
issue. You can't, but you do need to know that they will stand up for your civil rights, your human rights, your voting rights, your rights to an education, your rights to have children or not have children. And we need to support our business community. And I am a huge supporter of a business community, because I realize you can't have good schools and you can't have healthy families if you don't have good jobs.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, with living wages, and we struggle with that. Fairfax County is a very affluent county, but there's a tremendous disparity, a tremendous gap between the people who are struggling to live and work here in the county and those, that are highly educated and do have, very well-paying jobs. There's a huge gap, and we don't necessarily see the people who are struggling the most.
Well, we have to be aware of them. So my dad was in the military, and so when I grew up, I lived a lot of places. And when I became a delegate, the speaker asked me what committees did I want to be on, and I said I want to be on the Board of Veterans Services. And he thought I must have lost my mind. Everybody wants transportation if they live in Northern Virginia. But what I saw was a need. Nobody was addressing the issues for women veterans.
It's so funny you say that, because I just did a show with the AARP Veterans Outreach with Donna Newman Robinson, who is a former Army vet. And we did a show and talked exactly about that, how the needs of women veterans are so different, and that Virginia has the highest population of veterans outside of California.
Texas has more.
Do they really?
Yeah. So we have 104,000 women veterans, and it's growing every day. We have way too many women veterans living in their cars with their children.
Right.
We have done now 8 women veteran roundtables across the Commonwealth to listen to them and talk to people who are providing services for them, and to make sure that we address these issues. So when I came, there was no woman veterans coordinator in the Department of Veterans Affairs, which I thought was pretty ridiculous. So I fought to give money to, or to get money for a woman veterans coordinator, and I was able to do that.
And I think that's really important, because part of being a delegate is to figure out what problems need to be fixed and to fix them.
Well, that's one.
And when we come back from our break, we are going to be talking further with Delegate Kathleen Murphy.
Mom, I got it. What are you doing in there?
I got stuck.
Are you a dog?
I wouldn't do that. Have you seen the pliers? Where'd you find those?
It's not your birthday.
Sorry.
Bye, Grandpa.
Bye, Grandpa.
Take care of yourself.
What are you doing? What are you looking for?
You can achieve a lot using your imagination. I mean, I don't like to brag, but... Wait, who's that? And why is she all over these achievement awards? But with STEM, the sky's the limit. Shaboom! Use STEM to envision... Okay, I'm seeing it. Yeah. Invent...
Got any ideas?
I've got a few, actually. And create a better world.
Told you she's super smart.
If she can STEM, so can you. Find out more at She Can STEM.
Welcome back to Your Need to Know. Today I'm talking with Delegate Kathleen Murphy, who represents the House District 34, Thank you so much for being here, Kathleen.
Thanks for having me.
So one of the kind of the very sad things that we have in common is that each of us lost a brother to gun violence.
Yes, my brother was murdered by robbers, middle of the day, 2:30 in the afternoon on a bright sunny day. You never think that you're ever going to get that phone call.
No, I got a phone call in the middle of the night saying that my brother was found shot in the head in a river in Georgia. And I never expected to get that phone call either.
No.
So I think right now we are every time we say that this can't go on, this can't go on, this can't go on, it does.
Well, we have a president right now who calls on people to stand against immigrants. I mean, and then he labels people as immigrants and makes it sound like they have no value. He's a bad man. He is just a soulless bad man.
Well, several, people pointed out a number of things, including that he held a rally in El Paso, that right before the Ohio shooting, he was in southern Ohio. There's apparently like a 226% increase in hate crimes every place he's held a rally.
Well, it's because he calls these people invaders. This is an invasion. He needs us not to look at how poor a job he's doing as president and instead focus on something that will make us afraid. And he's doing a good job of that.
I agree. And, the NRA is right here in our own backyard. It's in Fairfax.
Corrupt.
But
NRA.
How did they gain so much power? I mean, they are a powerful organization. The Republicans have been largely silent on all of this.
But the NRA has been a lobbying activist since the 70s, really, even probably before that, but really changed over from teaching people responsible gun ownership to being a lobbyist. And they found issues that they could sell. And what they could sell was, if you have to fill out a form that attests to the fact that you're a good person and you're going to be a responsible gun owner, oh my God, that somehow violates your Second Amendment rights. They've expanded the Second Amendment so it's not even the Second Amendment anymore. Nowhere
That's
in the
true.
Second Amendment does it say any of that stuff.
No, and the Second Amendment said, a well-armed militia, and that was in response.
Well-regulated.
Well-regulated militia, but that was in response to the Revolutionary War.
Right.
We didn't have a standing army at the time that the conflict started.
Well,
And
right
property-
now we
and
have a
property was-
standing army, and that army is a bunch of people who have guns and are running around thinking we're being invaded by Mexicans. It's horrible what he has done.
I think so too, but I think that the will of the American people isn't there either. I saw an article in The Guardian, which is produced in the UK, about the fact that, once we tolerated not doing anything after Sandy Hook, that really the conversation was over. Because once we accepted that killing children was okay, there was no place left to go.
Well, here's what I would say to you, is if there had been a Democratic Congress and Democrats in control of the House of Delegates, we would have cared. We would have been able to pass legislation that takes guns out of the hands of violent domestic abusers. We would have been able to pass red flag laws that would have prevented, people with mental, disturbances from getting guns. We have taken all of those safeguards and thrown them out because Republicans are in charge.
And the universal background check, the whole thing with the shooter at the Garlic Festival is that they've got tighter gun control laws in California. He simply went to Nevada to get the gun.
Yeah.
And that's the other problem with having states. And again, to remind our viewers, the way our government was set up, some powers are federal.
And some are state.
And some are state. And so if the federal, doesn't act, then it's up to each state to cobble together. And in Virginia, even things like the one handgun per month ended up being repealed.
Well, I think the tragedy was background checks. And then the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. AR-15s,
Yeah, the
AK-47s.
semi-auto, and the high-capacity bump
Horrible.
stocks, high-capacity magazines.
That's right.
Why does anybody own those? Not to kill a deer.
Well, actually, it's illegal to kill a deer with one of those.
Really?
Yes.
Well, now that's something I did not know. Well, I guess that's good.
They have very strict regulations. You can't go shooting deers with
AR-15s.
AR-15s, you can't.
Yeah, so people who own them
It would
are,
shred them anyway.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to do anything with the meat afterwards. I mean, I eat venison, but I don't hunt. But you know, all of this, it's so perplexing to me. And then when we had the shooting closer to home in Virginia Beach, just unbelievable that on any given day, your workplace is shattered. Like nobody goes to work thinking this is going to happen in their workplace.
Well, I would tell you, I go to work in the General Assembly, and I've asked several times that guns not be allowed in the gallery above us. When Scott Taylor, who was a Navy SEAL, was a member of the House of Delegates, he said to me, the worst place for some enemy with a gun is above and behind you. Well, the gallery is above and behind most of us. And when I tried to get this initiated as a rule that guns are not allowed in the Senate, guns are allowed in the House gallery.
That is crazy.
Yeah, but I couldn't do it, and they stood up and said that I was insinuating, actually not insinuating, stating that our visitors were all enemies. And I thought, well, that's such a false argument.
It is a false
But
argument.
you know, when you look at what's going on and you see this, you know, just this overwhelming number of mass shootings, you just wait. You're looking up. I'm going to be sitting in my seat in the House of Delegates looking up. I promise you I'll be looking up.
Well, here's the thing too, you know, on Martin Luther King Day every year, which is a very big lobby day in the
Yes.
General Assembly,
They all bring guns.
they all bring guns. So people from all, just to prove a point, they all bring their guns because they're, you know, they're allowed to if they've
Well,
got a
I don't
permit
allow
to carry
guns
them.
in my office, and that really, really irritates them. They say that I'm denying them their rights, and I say, no, I'm honoring my own right not to be intimidated by someone carrying a gun into my office. It's my office.
And so with concealed carry permits, and again, this is the other part, and this is not about mass shootings. You know, 95 people a day, we are estimating because the CDC is prohibited from actually
Yes, of
studying
course. Well, that's been
gun
going on
violence.
forever. That
Yeah.
takes Congress to grow up
So,
and step up.
but you know, and again, this is where lobbying efforts put pressure on legislators not to allow us to count the injured and the dead, or to treat this like a public health crisis, which it is.
Which it is.
But we're estimating, because there are people who've done research with available resources, that about 95 people a day lose their lives to gun violence, and 10 of those are children.
Yeah.
And now that includes suicide. It includes accidental shooting, children shooting each other.
But I think it's even more awful or horrifying, really, that they will not. We have tried to pass laws that say you must lock your gun up if there are small children. Don't leave a loaded weapon on the table. When they say they have a right to do whatever they want. Well, how many children die because
So
they
many.
pick up a gun and they either shoot their playmate or they shoot and kill themselves?
Or shoot their parents. I
Well,
mean,
that too.
you know, reaching into a handbag and pulling out.
Oh, I remember that.
Do you remember that?
Wasn't that at Target or
Yep, and it was like Christmas Day.
Walmart or
Yeah, a
someplace
child
like that?
sitting in a shopping cart pulls
Yeah.
out the gun and shoots his mother on Christmas Day.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, but you know, none of this seems to make an impact.
No. I did go to a gun show, though, just to make sure that I was not misrepresenting something. And it's very interesting to see the massive number of guns laying on tables, just packed with guns.
I tell you what's disturbing to me is I saw on Facebook a candidate running for the school board in Hunter Mill was at a gun show registering voters.
Well, they do vote.
You know, I'm like, okay, well, you know, I find that just distressing.
The trouble is they probably wouldn't vote for her if she was a Democrat.
It's not a Democrat,
Well.
just something I saw, and I'm just thinking, so if you're trying to register voters at a gun show, one assumes that you are being
statement.
pro-gun
Making a statement.
as a school board member.
So I started the Gun Violence Prevention Caucus in the House of Delegates, and then I was the co-chair of the Safe Virginia Initiative. Following the shooting at Parkland, we looked across the Commonwealth. We talked to police, we talked to school counselors, we talked to kids, we talked to parents, we talked to healthcare providers to really get some view of how they were looking at this. And they asked us for more funding for school counselors, not school people who point you what college to go to. But
Right, mental
counselors,
health.
yes.
Right, somebody to talk to.
And I mean, there's a big concern. There's a big concern for the health and well-being of our students. But we did that. On the other hand, the Republicans did something called looking at school safety. They decided you could have bulletproof blackboards, bulletproof windows, bulletproof doors.
Hardening the schools.
But don't talk about guns.
No.
They did not address guns.
Hardening the schools.
Hardening schools.
And then, you know what you do when you do that? You make it like a prison.
And they want teachers
Carrying guns.
carrying guns.
But you know what? We're making our schools look like prisons.
But the teacher's first job in any crisis is to get the children together, calm them down, and get them to safety. Not to go to her desk, unlock, load a gun, and stand ready to fire. She doesn't have time to do both of those jobs. Which one is more important?
You're absolutely right. And all of this is about perspective, and the perspective from which you're looking at these issues.
Getting the children to safety.
So the legislature met in special session that the governor called.
And that was a joke,
Yes, it was. I think it lasted all of 45 minutes.
if that long.
And this is what happens when you have control of our Senate and our House, even if it's controlled by 2 seats in each.
Well, I think, though, the sad part for me was that I felt like they conned us because they actually had bills. They had bills that they asked us to co-patron. And yet they never had any intention of allowing those bills to go up for a vote or even to be assigned to a committee. So they played the game well, but they didn't do anything positive for the people of this Commonwealth.
And that's what, and to me, this is what people need to remember. First of all, we have an election, and it is November 5th, and these elections matter. And you need to people need to understand who is running and what they stand for.
Well, the other thing that they need to understand is even if that person is a nice guy and running as a Republican, the Republican caucus votes as a unit.
As a block.
And they are not allowed to vote differently. And so my opponent could come and say, well, I'll stand up for those, safety gun regulations. But he won't be able to, he won't be allowed to vote, he won't be allowed to vote differently from the Republican caucus. They don't allow it. And if you do, they take you off your committees, they punish you.
Well, and this is what I think people need to know. So thank you so much, Delegate Murphy, for being here. And for those of you at home,
Vote
this
for
is
me.
what you need to know. Remember that Kathleen Murphy is running for re-election.
Yes.